Do you have we start our webinar live stream. Welcome everybody. It sounds like there is a parade just moved into your location, Kyle.
As it happens, right? That's what we
Yeah.
have in the
Right.
office these
That's how it
days.
happens. I would like to formally welcome everybody who is watching this webinar. We're excited to have you here. Don't forget, as you are watching, before we dig into the webinar proper, if you are watching on YouTube, you can comment to us and we'll get the comments on our end. We would love to take questions. We will save those questions toward the end, and I will answer them to the best of her ability. And with that, let's get started. When we talk about workplace culture, we often focus on perks, remote work, flexible schedules, ping pong tables in the break room. But underneath it all, there is something far more consequential that speaks volumes about what organizations truly value, how openly they talk about pay. Pay transparency has moved from taboo to table stakes as new laws roll out for us in Massachusetts and in states beyond. And as employee expectations continue to evolve, you might be feeling pressure to adapt policies, retrain managers, and communicate with clarity, all while maintaining fairness, trust, and compliance. It's no longer about being reactive. This is about being strategic. To help us navigate this changing landscape, we welcome back Kyle Pardo, friend of the show and executive director at AIM-HR Solutions. With over 2 decades of experience supporting organizations through HR transformation, especially around compensation, compliance, and culture, Kyle is the person we turn to when we need to learn how to make these difficult conversations practical. She's back with us today to help unpack the realities of pay transparency from implementation to culture change. I'm Pete Wright, and this is Human Solutions. Kyle, welcome back.
So nice to see you back talking about our favorite topic.
Apparently, it is a perennial favorite for you and I. Let us start with we'll get the hard stuff out of the way. And it begins with the basics. What is the current status of pay transparency? What is it, and why is it such a big deal right now?
Sure. Well, we've been talking about this in Massachusetts, so, for the last year and a half or so, but the implementation date is coming up, getting closer. It's October 29th, so it's more on front of our mind. But pay transparency really has 2 components to it in Massachusetts. The first one was an obligation for employers with more than 100 employees to report wage data in February when they completed their EEO-1 report. So we've kind of passed that point. But what we're really looking at next is that starting October 29th of this year, employers of 25 or more employees will be required to post pay ranges anytime they post an open position. So if they're posting on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever site they're using, they'll be required to post a pay range. They'll also need to have it available if an internal employee asks them about what their own pay range is, or if they are going to promote or transfer an employee. So as you said, something that's been kind of taboo, you didn't really talk about pay for a while, is coming to the forefront. And, Massachusetts isn't first. There are about 13, 14 other states out there that have some version of pay transparency. But you will start seeing more and more jobs with those pay ranges as you look online, or, seeing openings posted in variety of places.
All right. Can you talk about pay transparency without talking about pay equity? It sure feels like these are hand-to-glove issues. And if you haven't dealt with one, can you sufficiently deal with the other?
No, they really go together and build upon each other. So, pay equity was a law passed back in 2018. So we're now well into that. But what the intent was of pay equity was to get us to a better place where men and women were paid comparably for comparable work. Ultimately, what has happened, though, is that there were very few court cases in these last 7 years, because it's difficult to know if you're being paid comparably when you don't know what somebody else makes. So, unless you're having these open conversations in your cafeteria or commuting to work or whatever it might be, you don't know what the possibility is or what their pay range might be for your position. And in many cases, companies don't even have pay ranges. And so what has traditionally happened over time is a company might have a budget of what they can spend. They find an applicant, they say, how much do you need to make for this job, or what have you been making in the past, which is no longer legal under pay equity. And that's how pay ranges were established. So now we're at this point 7 years later, and pay transparency is going to take pay equity to the next level because those pay ranges are going to be public. We're going to know, what our position is or our range is, and that might give us some better clarity on if we're being paid fairly and comparably within our organization. So if a company has kind of not thought about it yet, and this is the first time they're thinking about pay transparency and equity in their organization, they're going to need to think about what's going on in the marketplace. So am I competitive with other companies? But they're also going to need to look at internal equity. Do I have a structure and a system in place that is really going to be something that we're confident in, we know we have a fair system, and now we feel really confident about posting that out in the open.
I remember when we first started talking about pay equity, organizations came back with many surprises, and surprises that were largely cultural. How,
Yeah.
as soon as we were able to start talking about issues of equity, how employees responded became a surprise to a lot of managers who hadn't had to think about it yet. To what degree do you feel like we are sitting in the strike zone of another wave of surprises for managers?
Yeah. I mean, there could be surprises, right? So if a company is thinking about pay transparency, so I'm just going to put some numbers together and I'm going to, post these out there, and I haven't really thought about my philosophy behind that, for sure there could be some surprises. People who see a range and think like, gosh, why am I being paid at the low end of the range? Or, why is this position being paid what's being paid? So, the whole process that we're looking at right now with pay transparency is a whole lot more than just putting some numbers to a range. And it's really going to be a cultural shift in conversations.
I want to get to that, but first let's talk about some of the practical realities, the practical questions that managers are going to need to face head on as changes come about. What kinds of questions should our HR pros need to be ready to answer as they start implementing some of these changes?
Yeah, there are going to be a lot of questions. And I think one of the first things for a company to figure out is who's going to be answering those questions. So are you going to enable your managers to answer those questions? Are you going to train them so that they feel comfortable answering those? Or is everything going to go through HR? But the questions could be things, as I said, if let's just give an example. If the range that we post for a job is 50 to 65,000, and I see that posted, I'm already in my job, I'm comfortable, I'm doing well, I've been happy in my job, but this range is 50 to 65,000. I see it posted on Indeed because the company is hiring somebody else, and maybe I'm making 52,000. So I'm in the lower end of that range. I might go to my supervisor and say, hey, well, I want to be in the higher end of the range. How come I'm in the lower end? What does that look like, and how did you decide that? It might be that I find out that a coworker is being paid higher in that range. I might want to know, how the company came up with that range in the first place. Where did they come up with that data? What made them think that was a good range? Somebody might say, how come you never told me my salary range when I was hired? I've worked with this company for a couple of years, and this is the first time I'm ever hearing about a range. So I think some conversations that we just, haven't had before are going to be new for us.
Yeah, I think especially the implicit question in all of those is, what do I need to do to negotiate my salary within this new posted range? What sort of agency do I have as an employee? And this seems to dovetail quite nicely into other topics we've covered on this show around documentation and being able to really document your relationship with an employee's performance over time so that you can answer these questions.
I think you've just said you're a real HR professional now, Pete. I mean, documentation is is key. That's it all goes back to documentation. So yeah, when you put this, whatever this compensation system is that you're putting together now, where did it come from? What is it based on? Documenting that. And then once you create those rules, you have to follow them.
You have
So
to follow them.
negotiations, I think, will be a little bit harder. Once these structures are put in place, you really need to go with what you've foundation you've laid.
Does pay transparency mean everyone gets paid the same?
No. So there is a range, right? And so the guidance even from the Attorney General's office says that things that will not count as a range, something that says $20 an hour, that is not a range. Unless it's something that's negotiated maybe by a union, that might be the only time when that is considered appropriate. But it really will be a range, meaning that there are going to be people at the low end, there are going to be people in the middle, and there are going to be people in the high end. So it does not mean everybody is going to be paid the same. And where you fall within that range could be based on things like performance, seniority, a certain education or training or skill set that you have. So you should be clear that you'll be within a certain dollar amount of your coworkers in the same position, because everybody in that position will be in the same range, but not the exact same pay.
Okay, so let's talk about implementation. A couple of different areas or vectors of approach for an implementation discussion. What advice do you give to companies who are hopefully not just beginning, but maybe at the start of a journey toward transparent pay practices?
Yeah. So this is really, it's not going to be kind of a checklist. It's going to be starting to think about your culture. I look at this, if we want to break it down, in probably about 5 different steps. The first one is going to be looking at market data. How are you paying compared to external companies? Who are your competitors? The second step is going to be internal equity. So how do you compare yourself to, or compare a role internally to other people? The third step is going to be developing those pay ranges. And really, that's going to take some thought process, because it is, the ranges must be reasonable and in good faith. Okay, so you can't have a range that's 50,000 to 100,000. That would not be considered reasonable. But the third step is really going to be, kind of putting those ranges together. The fourth one is going to be communication. So internal communication, what does that look like, and how are you going to train your managers? And then the fifth one is kind of that external communication. So, who posts positions, what's considered an official posting, and what does the range look like when you post it?
Okay. As you are doing all of these reviews, what is the first one you might recommend managers start looking at first? Manager training, job architecture, straight to compensation plans. When we alluded to documentation earlier, what are the first ducks you need to get in a row?
Yeah, come up something about what their culture is. What types of areas do they want to reward? So if you don't have any pay ranges at all, you want to think about, what is your culture? So are you looking to be the top payer out there? Do you have really good benefits? So maybe your pay ranges can be a little bit lower compared to other companies. And then within that, do you reward for a certain skill set? Are there certain degrees or certain technologies that people need to know that you want to pay more for, and that becomes part of your documentation. And so once you have those ranges established, you can say, okay, but if you come to us with this degree that's really important to us, we're going to pay more for that, and we're going to start to document those types of things.
You brought up something that I hadn't thought of. If you have 0 ranges already, if you don't have any ranges already, how are you establishing those ranges? How do you recommend approaching those, based on existing employee qualifications?
Yeah. So first of all, there are a lot of companies that don't have any ranges. They've just kind of grown over time, and not even just small companies, some larger companies as well that don't have any ranges at all. And so the my recommendation is typically with the kind of what I would consider typical range structure. You're going to have several levels, so almost kind of think of a ladders, right? Several different levels in your organization, and a range for each of those levels. Each level is going to have a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum, so you can kind of see this starting to build. If it's a lower level, meaning an entry level position in your company, you're going to have a range that's a smaller range because people get promoted more quickly when they're at a lower level. So they might move from kind of the, assistant level to the coordinator level to the specialist level in a couple of years' time. So those ranges aren't that big. And then you start to think about your exempt positions, your managers, your directors, your vice presidents, where somebody might stay in a range for a long period of time. So, I don't want to get too in depth on like what that looks like, but it's a lot more than just saying, let's put some numbers out there and just say, like, let's just make up kind of what the range is for this position. There really is a thought process behind what the structure is and how people will grow in your company over time. How will you reward people, and how will you have a career plan for people?
Sure. And it seems like, the consideration is, once you get beyond the market demand for a certain salary range, there is the sort of cultural demand for the range, and we should talk about that, the cultural elephant in the room. As much as transparency is a policy shift, it is a bigger cultural shift, and I'd like to know from your perspective how HR teams prepare leaders and managers for potential discomfort along the way.
Yeah. The first thing I think in a lot of these situations for a manager is going to be, empathetic. When somebody says, well, why am I making 52,000 when I know the range goes up to 65,000, and saying, I understand how that might be a concern for you, or why you might want to know that. So really understanding that employees are going to have those types of questions. So I think that's the first piece. I think they're going to be employees, again, you mentioned before, who are going to say, how do I get to the top end of that range? What do I need to do to get there? So having those conversations about how will you help develop your employees? What are you going to do to help them over time to gain those additional skills, to give them the thought that they might be able to move up in the salary range over time? And I think there are going to be organizations who are going to tell some managers, like, we don't even want you talking about it at all. We want it all to go through HR. Just
Right.
anytime if somebody asks you a question, say, you know what, let me connect with HR and they'll answer your questions. So I think because managers haven't done this in the past, they haven't really had these conversations. And so, is there that comfort level to have different people talking through salary with employees?
Does that go against the intent of regulation?
To not have managers answer questions?
Yeah. I mean, well, managers answering questions, people talking about pay, or versus funneling all questions of pay to HR. It seems like the intent, if not specifically the letter, is we're just making things public. You can talk about it now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that even actually goes back to pay equity. So back to 2018, you specifically cannot tell your employees not to talk about salaries. That's not okay. So if anybody wants to talk about it, that's okay. That people can have those conversations. It might just be that the manager doesn't feel equipped to give kind of the philosophy behind the company's pay structure, or what the actual technique that was used to design it. So the manager might want to pass those types of questions off.
Given the cresting wave of surprise we talked about, what do you do when you are confronted with an issue of transparency that reveals inequity that has gone unaddressed? Right? To what degree does the employee have a way to advocate for, this is a thing we didn't think about, and I'm feeling it now? What do we do?
Well, one of the things I would say is we've got about 6 months right now between now and October 29th. So if this would be the time for a company to really start getting these, this review in place, ranges in place, so that hopefully the company can uncover any of those inequities before the ranges go public, because afterwards is going to be a bit more difficult. Right, the conversation is going to be different. It's going to be led by the employee asking questions. So, I would use this time right now, these next 5 months or so, to to really take a look at your organization, and if there are any of those inequities, figure out how to deal with it. And as we've worked with companies, there are lots of stories out there, Pete. There are lots of situations where people say, well, this person, they were a friend of the owner, and so they got a special deal, and that's why they get paid what they get paid. Now's the time to try to figure out, are they in the right role? Are you paying people the right amount? Is there a way to remedy some of those types of situations before the ranges are posted?
I recognize that it feels like all of the questions that I've been sending your way here are scary, negative, hard questions, right?
Yeah.
How do we deal with discomfort?
Yeah.
I would love to know from your perspective what it looks like when an organization is just nailing it. It's just doing it right. What does success look like in a post-pay transparency, successfully post-pay equity environment? Who's doing it well?
I think it's going to actually be positive. I know we're talking about the difficulties and getting these systems in place and the conversations, but I overall think this is going to be really positive for a lot of people. I'm going to start at the beginning with the recruiters. When people are applying for a job, they are going to look on Indeed. They'll see the range posted. They'll be able to say, is that the range that I'm looking for? And if it's not the range that you're looking for, maybe that's not the right role for you. So I think for the recruiter and the applicant, it's going to save a lot of time. I've mentioned to you, I equate it to purchasing a car. You kind of have your budget out there. You don't want to waste your time at a dealership if it's not the right range for you when you're purchasing a car. Same thing when you're looking at a job, and this is a big part of your life, obviously working. So you want to make sure that you feel comfortable with what the compensation is. So I think that's really going to benefit the recruitment process. I think it is going to open up conversation in a company. And again, as long as the company feels like they have gone through a fair and equitable process of putting all this information together, they should feel really comfortable posting their ranges, and be ready to think about what their response is to employees. But any company that has really taken the time to put a structure in place, there can still be questions, but they should feel a lot better about their answers.
All right. Let's do just a rapid fire of a couple of quick questions as we lead toward wrap up, and then we'll take some questions from the chat.
Sure.
What are some common misconceptions about pay transparency that you wish we could retire?
Well, there's a couple. I'd say negotiations, as I mentioned, I think negotiations are kind of off the table. Pay transparency, the range is the range, and you need to stay within the range. What else? Misconceptions. I guess what a range is. And again, I mentioned a couple of things that are not a range. So saying up to 65,000 is not a range. Starting at 25,
that range is 0 to 65,000.
Right. Yeah. Saying starting at $25 an hour, that's not a range.
Okay.
Saying $50,000 to $100,000, that's not a range. So reasonable and in good faith. So,
are you a friend of the owner? Is not a range.
That's not a good question. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, keeping that in mind.
Okay. What role will technology and compensation tools play in making this easier to manage?
There will likely be, just about every payroll company will have some type of system in their payroll that will allow you to enter ranges and to determine if somebody is outside of the ranges. So, if you're using the large payroll companies, even the smaller ones, you will start to see that really being a feature that you can track where people are in their ranges. And you should run those reports, every 6 months at least, to say, where are the people in the range? Look at a kind of a scattergram, a kind of plotting of where your people are in ranges, and make sure that people are in line where you need them to be. I think we all know that that AI and searching for information online becomes easier and easier every year. And so if your ranges that you're posting are not competitive with what other companies are, you may start to see that impact your organization more, as people, they can shop around, they can find the best deal, or find the best job for them based off of what they're finding on the internet. So we'll see technology play a role there.
All right, we've got over 100 people in the room with us right now listening to this. What is one thing you would like every HR leader listening to this episode to walk away with?
Right now, I'm going to say start now. Don't October's coming soon, right? Where it's 5 months away. If you're tuning in and you are, Massachusetts, that's the timeline. But if you are from another state that does not have pay transparency, it could be coming your way. Again, it's a moving trend. There's 14 states or so that have it now. But the last one is once you set your ranges, this is not a set it and forget it. This is a set it and review it every year type of situation. So if you create your ranges now and don't touch them again, you're going to find people who they'll keep getting increases every year. So they're going to start to bump up against the top of those ranges, and you're going to be kind of in a stuck between a rock and a hard place there. So this is a kind of every year to review your salary ranges, and at least every couple of years, kind of take a look again at pay equity and how you're doing within those ranges. So this is a new part of your life.
Now is the time. All right, we've got a couple of questions. Let's take from the chat as we wind up our time together today. Cynthia asked, "Did you say this applies only to organizations with over 100 employees? What again were the specifications?"
So 25 or more. 25 or more. 25 more of the salary ranges. The other component of pay equity or pay transparency, the other component of pay transparency, which is the EEO1 reporting back in February, that was for 100 or more. But the pay ranges are 25 or more.
25 or more. This impacts a lot of organizations. Okay.
It does. Yeah.
Amy asked a question. I think we addressed this. I would think salary ranges are being established around existing employees and pay ranges. If not, are they realistic ranges?
So you will find some companies who will do that. They'll say, well, you know what, our pay ranges, we're going to take a look at what employees are currently getting paid, and we're going to take the lowest employee to the highest employee, and that we'll call that our pay range.
Sure.
I suppose you could do that, but I'd recommend kind of a more formal process of, again, internal equity, external equity, and developing a range, and then plotting where people are then within your established range. And if you have somebody who falls outside that range, that's where we were talking about. What do you do with that person now to remedy that? Do you need to bring somebody up more, or what do you need to do?
Okay. Chandler asks, are there any case studies related to when other states made pay transparent, or many years ago when CEO pay was made public?
Case studies, I'm not sure maybe what exact case studies, maybe you're looking for what went well or what didn't go well. I don't know. I do know that there are some companies who have started this pay transparency process earlier this year, who their thought process was, we're going to start slowly. So our next position we post, we're going to post the range for that position because we feel pretty good about that range. And then when we hire again later this summer, we'll post the next range for that position. And we'll rather than doing this big reveal in October and causing kind of a big stir, we're going to kind of gradually leak out the ranges, which is perfectly fine. You can, if you're ready to go, you can start doing that now and sending that out. So that might be a way to think about it as, rather than waiting and doing it all at once.
I'll echo Chandler's follow-up. Baby steps. I like it.
I like that. Yes.
Yeah. Baby steps. But if you're going to be baby stepping, start today.
Yes.
Start right now.
Yeah. And with baby steps, you'll start to hear what are the concerns? What types of questions are you getting from employees? And you'll start to formulate what your response is going to be before you go big.
Kyle, Pardo, thank you so much for illuminating this topic for us today. I'm so glad we could do it. It is, as you mentioned, it's our favorite topic to talk about together. I'll do it anytime you want.
We'll come back together in September, just before the deadline.
Yeah, that's right. And thank you everybody for hanging out with us today, hanging out in the webinar, and for those of you who are listening to this after the fact by way of the podcast. Human Solutions. You can find us in Spotify and Apple Podcasts, anywhere fine podcasts are served. You can ask us questions about pay transparency. Just email hrinfo@aimhrsolutions.com. And as you may have heard in past episodes and episodes to come, we love taking questions off the helpline. The HR helpline is at 1-800-470-6277 for AIM members, or helpline at aimnet.org. We would love to take questions there as well. On behalf of Kyle Pardo and everybody here at AIM HR Solutions, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you next month right here on Human Solutions.
Thanks so much.